Good morning. It is the day after the autumnal equinox, September 23rd, 2020. And the equinox is an opportunity for us to honor the changing of the seasons and to unite with our ancestors and with people all over the planet that do exactly the same thing. And I am here in a very special place this morning, celebrating the equinox. I'm at the home of my friend Lindsay Abramitis Smith, who some of you know. And she's a member and a contributor in Nowhere Village. And actually, just last night, we were talking about her offering some more teachings to you guys. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about her and about the value of friendship and ceremony, which is what I came here to do a little equinox ceremony with her. And so, yeah, this morning I'm going to give a slightly shorter talk, and we'll do the song at the end so that Lindsay can sleep in a little bit. So I actually wanted to start today with a poem, and this was read to me a few days ago by another dear friend of mine, and it felt like it really resonated with what we're talking about here at Nowhere Village this month. So this is written by a Puerto Rican Jewish feminist poet and activist named Aurora Levins Morales. And as always, I will make sure that you guys all have access to this and that she gets full credit for her beautiful words. And John Samuel, you might have to correct me on there's not a lot of Hebrew in here, but the title is Hebrew, so you can correct me later if I flub the pronunciation. Va'ahavta. Say these words when you lie down and when you rise up, when you go out and when you return. In times of mourning and in times of joy, inscribe them on your doorposts, embroider them on your garments, tattoo them on your shoulders. Teach them to your children, your neighbors, your enemies. Recite them in your sleep, here in the cruel shadow of empire. Another world is possible. Thus spoke the prophet Roque Dalton. Altogether, they have more death than we. But altogether, we have more life than they. There is more bloody death in their hands than we could ever wield, unless we lay down our souls to become them. And then we will lose everything. So instead, imagine winning. This is your sacred task. This is your power. Imagine every detail of winning. The exact smell of the summer streets in which no one has been shot. The muscles you have never unclenched from worry, gone soft as newborn skin. The sparkling taste of food when we know that no one on this earth is hungry, that the beggars are fed, that the old man under the bridge and the woman wrapping herself in thin sheets in the back seat of a car, and the children who suck on stones, nest under a flock of roofs that keep multiplying their shelter. Lean with all your being toward that day. when the poor of the world shake down a rain of good fortune out of the heavy clouds, and justice rolls down like waters. Defend the world in which we win as if it were your child. It is your child. Defend it as if it were your lover. It is your lover. When you inhale and when you exhale, breathe the possibility of another world into the 37.2 trillion cells of your body until it shines with hope. Then imagine more. Imagine rape is unimaginable. Imagine war is a scarcely credible rumor. That the crimes of our age, the grotesque inhumanities of greed, the sheer and astounding shamelessness of it, the vast fortunes made by stealing lives, the horrible normalcy it came to have, is unimaginable to our heirs. The generations of the free. Don't waver. Don't despair. Don't let despair sink its sharp teeth into the throat with which you sing. Escalate your dreams. Make them burn so fiercely that you can follow them down any dark alleyway of history and not lose your way. Make them burn clear as a starry drinking gourd over the grim fog of exhaustion, and keep walking. Hold hands. Share your water. Keep imagining so that we and the children of our children's children may live. Thank you so much to the poet, and thank you to my friend who suggested that to me, who read it to me, and the same thing happened when she read it to me, and I knew that that was a sign that it was something I needed to read again and wanted to share. I think that when we talk about envisioning a better world, it's really easy to become stuck in the practicalities of how certain things won't be possible. It's so important. It's been so important for me to not try to do it alone. And so turning toward my sources, turning toward resources, toward the artists and the visionaries and the activists, and letting their wisdom, letting them hold me, right, with their wisdom and their truth and their beauty, participating in that way in art and in spiritual practice, just turning toward others and saying, can hold me up. It gives the artist an opportunity to, and the poet an opportunity to offer. And it is absolutely what keeps bringing me back to my own truth and my own vision as we go. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali tells us that the ego, right? The ego, which one could say is the aspect of the self. Well, the description of ego is the aspect of the self that thinks that it's separate. And there is a practical and even a divine purpose to having an ego, to having this sense of separateness. But as Patanjali tells us in the Yoga Sutras, and as comes up in this poem, right, the ego is the part of the self that can become uh, it becomes stuck on a false story of where power comes from. That's actually what he says when he describes asmita, the Sanskrit word for ego. He says the and he's describing it in a section of the sutras, which is talking about what causes suffering. And he says that the ego is basically, the ego is fine. The problem is it's fine to sometimes feel separate or to identify as an individual. The problem is that when we think that the individual has powers that it doesn't. And what the equinox is a beautiful reminder of, and the solstice, and I personally celebrate the full moon and the new moon every month in small ways. The value of that for me is that the natural world is, for me, a very sacred, holy source. And for me, it reminds me of our interconnectedness. And it reminds me that the real power of wholeness belongs to all of us. Anyone who can see the moon, anybody who has felt the sun on them, right? Anyone who's walked on earth or eaten food out of the soil belongs to this. It's not, there's no hierarchy, there's no dogma. It's right here all the time. And it's in the breath, as we talked about in this meditation today. The sense of separateness, the ego starts to think that life would be more enjoyable if maybe I had something that nobody else had. Maybe I'm the only one who gets to look at the moon. Would that make me happier? Would that make me special? Would that make me more like God? And due to circumstances I don't totally understand, the ego seems to have won the day for the last handful of millennia. um, Not completely, and never completely. It can't. But we do live in a situation where certain people seem to have a whole lot of things that others don't. There has to be a belief in there for that to be perpetuated. There has to be a belief in there somewhere that having something all to oneself makes it more enjoyable. And that we've all fallen in some kind of trap that comes from this root source of ego. All of us. I do it all day, and I'm at a place where I can pull myself back, right? Again and again. This theme that's been running through a lot of our talks. Whatever pleases you keeps you back, and pleases you not like satisfies you. He's talking about like pleases you, these little things that make us feel specialer, and that make us believe that our power lies in having something that others don't. And so my connection with the natural world brings that for me, and everyone here, I think, has a similar relationship to the natural world, but of course you don't have to find it there. Ultimately, we're just seeing outside of ourselves what exists inside, which is this wholeness, this connectedness. The Sargadatta says, "Sir, you are not separate. Whatever happiness you cannot share is spurious." He's saying, if you can't, if you're gonna take your little piece of cake and go hide in the corner and eat it, there's gonna be fear with you in that corner. There's gonna be disconnection with you in that corner. You're not gonna be able to fully enjoy it in the way that you want. And then what are you gonna need? More cake? So you think, but that's not actually what we need. As she says in the poem, like, when we know that no one's hungry, what would food taste like? What does it mean to really have enough? Because even if you're the 1% and you've got all the stuff in the world, you better believe there's fear in there. There's some kind of embattlement in there, even if it's not conscious completely, even if that kind of wound hasn't come to the surface as a boil yet in that space. But today, what I would really love for you guys to do this week and for the rest of this month, and I don't know, as you go into this season, is to feel into the aspects of yourself that aren't ego, which is lots of them and most of them, but the aspects all day long you're participating in wholeness, and to see if you can find the power there. That connecting to something bigger happens in the now always. And then find for yourself other reminders, other touchstones, right? For me, the view, like, I try to look at the moon every day. I try to see the sunrise and the sunset every day and look at the moon every night. I mean, it's so simple, but find these little ways of connecting this week, and then consider for yourself ways of honoring that connection a little more deeply in honor of the equinox, if you haven't already. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lindsay and I and what we did for our ceremony, just as a possible inspiration. And then I'll take questions. So Lindsay reached out to me a few weeks ago and said, we should do a ceremony for the equinox. And we couldn't find a weekend to work. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be powerful for me to come on the actual equinox? But that means I'm going to have to do my Wisdom Wednesday talk at your house. And she said, okay. So here we are. And as we were texting, trying to figure this out, we realized that the first ceremony that we did together, which was actually the first ceremony I ever did. She's a ceremony queen who's been doing them for her whole life. But though we all have ceremony in our lives, and it came to me through theater and other practices, there's definitely ceremony in my life. I wasn't conscious, and I never called it such. So this was my first real ceremony, and it was with my dear friend Lindsay, and we were in our mid-20s, late 20s, and yeah, and living in Brooklyn, and we met at a theater company there and had become really good friends that summer, and we're working on a little show together as well. We're starting to work on a play together. She invited me over for this ceremony, and it was really simple. We honored all the elements. It's a great way to organize any ceremony that you do. We honored all the elements. She smudged us with we used fire she used a smudge, and we used fire. Some of you have done fire ceremony with me before, where there's a fire in front of you or a candle and you burn something in the fire. At the time, we also smoked a joint at the beginning of our ceremony. Um, and as part of our fire, honoring fire. And then she led all of this for me and for a couple of other women. And for Earth, we buried seeds in some soil that she had in her apartment. And we blew our intentions into the seeds, what we wanted to grow, and we buried the seeds. While she was smudging, I think she was also helping us let go of, whatever we wanted to get rid of, right? For air, we sang and spoke. And for water, we did like a little bathing ceremony to purify. And then at the end, we ate lots of chocolate cake, which we like smushed it into our face. It felt really good at the time. And there is a bit more to it, of course, but essentially this was our ceremony. And I remember being in a very, very vulnerable place and in a place with a lot of desire and yearning. I, within a couple of weeks, was in my yoga teacher training program, my first one. So I started my yoga teaching career basically like right after that ceremony. And I met through the same friend, through Lindsay, I met my future husband, now ex-husband. And actually, shortly after that ceremony, I introduced her to her future husband, now ex-husband. Um, and so for years after that, we said, God, that was the most powerful ceremony, you know? And it was such a new beginning. And there was a time in the middle where I can admit this now, but I would never have been able to at the time, where I almost felt like my friend Lindsay was like a bridge for me to get these other things. Like I walked into that ceremony so desperate for a particular kind of partner and for a particular kind of career that I just had never had never tasted. And then I got it. And even though during the ceremony I was so tapped into the universal and the wholeness, I found myself, whatever pleases you keeps you back, right? Like I found myself being quite pleased with what my ego had gotten out of that experience. And I kept doing ceremony. I was hooked. But in some ways, I think I found myself again kind of doing it like in a materialistic way or in an egoic way. Like, I'm going to plant this seed. I'm going to get the thing that I want. Like, let's plant a Corvette. Like, not that that was ever something I wanted, a Corvette, but you know what I mean? Like, you know, and this decade brought a lot of beautiful things, but it also has brought, I mean, enormous, enormous challenges. And as many of you know, those of you who know Lindsay, if you don't, you'll hopefully you'll get to know her through some of her talks here or something soon. But she a few years after that ceremony was diagnosed with ALS, and 10 years ago she was this like bright, buoyant, all over the place, you know, running all over the place, making art of all kinds, performer, um, and artist. And she's still all of these things, but because of the limitations of her body, because of the disease, at this point she's in bed all the time, right? She can't move on her own and needs support. And she's been learning how to make peace with her original, all of her visions for her life having to completely alter. And those of you who know my story know that in the last couple of years, my vision for my life and my, in less extreme ways, right? But all the things that I a bunch of things that I thought that I was aiming toward also were sort of taken. And I think that 10 years ago, as these 28-year-old women, totally understandably, we thought that we were planting something kind of like fun and perky for ourselves for the next decade. And what we got, but also deep underneath that desire, each of us are we're really yearning to become wise women, awake humans. And what I thought were the fruits of those seeds that we planted, like just the kind of the good, the good stuff, that wasn't that wasn't all. We were also planting seeds for the challenges that came up, because it's actually through those challenges that the two of us have become so much wiser. And so and as long for me, as long as I had that, the perfect little life, and this like all this nice stuff going on just fine, it made me uncomfortable to see other people who I thought maybe were suffering. It made me feel separate, right? My little piece of chocolate cake is going to make me suddenly, I'm going to have to start wars to protect this piece of chocolate cake. I'm going to have to defend, I'm going to have to shield my own eyes so that I don't feel guilty. I'm going to, so, and this was sort of the experience that I had. And that what we really, really wanted in many ways came from getting what we wanted and having it taken away. And so last night in our ceremony, we honored all the elements again. And a decade later, in many ways, like from the outside, I think that what we were doing looked really similar. Though Lindsay was master of ceremonies from her bed, while me and one of her wonderful helpers um, made an altar and went out and got soil from outside and brought it in. And I did the smudging this time. But internally, we're in very different places than we were, thanks to ceremony and thanks to all these practices. And I realized that all these kind of gifts that I thought kind of like, oh wow, Lindsay just like brings me gifts. I realized the gift is her. It's a relationship with a friend, a teacher, with someone who is gonna make you show up on the equinox and do that, so that you can stop and connect to something bigger. I didn't get done a bunch of stuff on my to-do list. That doesn't matter. And as long as I think that checking things off the to-do list is what pleases me and keeps me happy and where the power is, I'm stuck. I have to do that sometimes. Of course, a lot of the time. But I think I was so fixated with sort of the fruits of our practices together, the partner and the jobs or whatever, that where I am right now is I feel like, okay, fruits are going to come and go, right? These men that we introduced each other to aren't here anymore, but we're the grove, right? We're like the trees themselves, and with our roots interconnecting and our branches shading each other, protecting our children and our children's children in the forms of the little acorns, and and that we can keep coming back to these relationships with one another, which brings us back again to the relationship, to the universe, to spirit, to the whole. I'm going to read you one quote and then I'm going to send you guys on your way unless there's any questions. Oh, and we're going to sing. We're going to sing. This is Nisargadatta. The higher your aims and the vaster your desires, the more energy you will have for their fulfillment. Desire the good of all, and the universe will work with you. But if you want your own pleasure, you must earn it the hard way. So I wish for all of you today and this week and in this coming season of fall to be able to get in touch with constant reminders of where the real power is in this wholeness that you can connect to through yourself at any moment. I wish for all of you to enjoy the fruits, to enjoy the fruits of your practices and the fruits of all your efforts in your whole life. But also remember that the fruits come and go, but there's something bigger that produces them and composts them and brings up new life. And sounds like she's up. And keep nurturing this vision and keep in touch with the people that you love. I'm learning I don't need that many friends. I don't need that many relationships, just a few good ones. But those really, really, really deserve the time and the energy. All right, let's chant to close.